For most places, it's dry on Wednesday. Largely sunny conditions, but cold, with the wind accentuating the cold, particularly across northern parts of Scotland. So it's staying cold this week. We do have warnings in place. See the Met Office website for more details on those.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. The cold weather has come. With it, the highest energy prices ever seen on these islands. Is it time for an energy rethink? We'll debate that. I've been away for a week. Believe you me, the migrant crisis hasn't got any better. Are there any solutions in sight? What do we do with the large number of Albanians coming across? Joining me for Talking Pints, Mark Littlewood. He's the boss of the IEA and used to be the press officer for the Liberal Democrats. Well, there'll be a few things to talk about there, won't there? But before we get to the show, let's get the news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. Our top story this hour. Police have named 7 people believed to have been killed following an explosion at a block of flats in Jersey over the weekend. They are Peter Bowler, Raymond Brown, Romo and Louise de Almeida, Derek and Sylvia Ellis and Billy Marston. 5 people are confirmed to have died following the blast in St Helier. We'll bring you more information on that as we get it. Now, rail strikes will continue into the Christmas period after members of the RMT union rejected the latest pay offer put on the table. 63% of the union's members turned down a deal offered by Network Rail of a 5% pay rise this year and a 4% pay rise next. 2 48-hour strikes will now go ahead this week, starting tomorrow. MP Oliver Dowden says all strikes should be called off.
Single best thing that could be done to minimise those risks, we can't eliminate them altogether, is for the strikes to be called off and for those unions to once again engage with the employers. Because I think it's only fair and reasonable that at a time when people are struggling both with the consequence of the situation in Russia, Ukraine, as we emerge from COVID, and indeed this winter weather, I don't think most people think it's fair and reasonable to undertake these strikes. So my message to them would be, even now, please call them off.
Well, our other main story on GB News today, 3 young boys have died after falling through an icy lake in Solihull yesterday. Police say the children, who were 8, 10 and 11 years old, were in cardiac arrest when they were pulled from the icy water in Kingshurst. A 4th boy, aged 6, remains in a critical condition in hospital. A lab technician has been found guilty of murdering his work colleague at his parents' home in Leicestershire last year. Ross McCullum pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of 23-year-old Megan Newborough, but claimed he couldn't be guilty of murder because he acted out of control due to undiagnosed PTSD. The court heard how he tried to cover up the murder by hiding her clothes in bins and professing his love for her in a voicemail just 3 hours after he'd killed her. The second trailer of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's Netflix docu-series has been released, with Prince Harry accusing some of lying to protect his brother. It's not clear who he's referring to. He was also seen musing on what might have happened if he hadn't left the royal family. The latest 3 episodes will be released on Thursday. Those are your latest news headlines. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Time now for Farage.
Good evening. Well, I'm pleased to be back after my week in the United States of America. And the themes we're going to be discussing and debating tonight are ones that we've talked about for well over a year, because I've tried my absolute hardest to warn people that we have a real problem in our energy market. Let's just remember the course that all of our political parties in Westminster have set us on. A reminder, if you like. Here was Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister at COP26, telling us about our energy future.
It was the private sector that enabled the UK to end our dependence on coal, become the Saudi Arabia of wind.
So that was interesting, wasn't it? It was the private sector through renewables, meaning wind. Mr. Johnson didn't mention, nobody ever mentions, that none of it could have survived without tens of billions of pounds of taxpayer subsidy. All of it loaded onto your bills over the course of the last 20 years. And as for becoming the Saudi Arabia of wind, well, just go up the east coast of England and you'll see huge numbers of wind turbines. All of it sounds wonderful, but there is ever such a slight problem. When it gets cold, and regular watchers and listeners to this show might be bored with this by now, because I've been telling you, if we get a cold spell, if we get a big anticyclone high pressure, we'll have maximum demand for power, we'll have high prices, and we'll have very little being produced by wind. In a moment, I'll tell you today just how much wind energy has contributed towards our electricity supply. And as for the end of coal, Boris Johnson proud of the fact that no longer do we need coal. Well, we do need coal. Apparently the go-ahead's been given by the government for the anthracite mine in Cumbria, but goodness knows how long that will take to actually come into effect. We need coal. You can't make steel without anthracite coal. But we also hear today the government is getting ready to reopen 2 coal-fired power stations, and that is because there is a genuine threat that either the price becomes too high of buying in electricity or, frankly, the lights go out. So my debate tonight, is it time to rethink our energy policy? I genuinely, passionately believe that it is, and I can't think of a better moment with much of the country covered in snow when we should actually raise this, debate it and discuss it. Well, joining me is Harry Wilkinson. He's Head of Policy for Net Zero Watch. Harry, over the decades, lots of talk about, balance of energy, bits from nuclear and bits from this and bits from that. I don't think people really have a full picture. I'm going to put up on the screen now for you to have a look at, and for our radio listeners we will explain. This was the situation on National Grid at 9 o'clock this morning. On renewables, solar was producing the grand total of 0%. All those solar panels we see, Harry, in our farmers' fields, 0%, and wind, 3.5%. Now, I keep being told that the more wind turbines we build, that actually it's going to be 30, 40, 50% of our energy needs. What went wrong this morning?
Well, I think politicians have treated our energy policy as if it was a popularity contest. we like wind, we like solar, so let's just build out those. They've ignored the fact that actually you need to provide a grid that provides the energy when people need it. And what we've seen this winter is an increasingly tight energy margin, and National Grid have said they think it will cost between £200 and £400 million just to keep these 2 coal-fired power stations on backup. Now, it turns out this evening they weren't actually required, but we've seen record prices. Yet.
I mean, here's the point. I think that when wind goes down to 3.5%, and by the way, it can go lower than that, can't it?
I mean, wind can go very, very low, close to 0% of our energy needs, and we've got a plan just to build it out larger and larger. But we haven't dealt with that core problem of intermittency. That's the variability of wind. It can be as high as 60%, but it can be as low as 0%. And so this is leaving us with an increasingly expensive grid that needs all core...
Harry, I've been told by the Green campaigners, you're wrong, because we can store the electricity.
Well, we were told that this would happen. And people like Net Zero Watch and the Global Warming Policy Foundation have been warning politicians that unless you deal with this problem, we're going to have these kind of very high prices. And we needed that storage to be ready now. We needed these policies to be ready now. And we were told, don't worry, as wind grows, we'll have all these solutions. Well, we're in a situation now where we've built a huge amount of wind and those solutions just haven't been ready.
So to keep the lights on today, we've had to burn a lot of gas, but we're also importing, and this is the point I want to reinforce. We import electricity from Norway, from France, from Belgium, although the French supply is not as reliable as it was as their nuclear fleet gets older. As a result of that, just tell us what happened, in simple English, to energy prices today.
Well, a small gas power station in North London, not a big scale one, was charging the National Grid £6,000 per megawatt hour. And that is a record for the balancing mechanism. And that's the National Grid's system that they have to make sure that in real time, supply is meeting demand at any particular moment.
£6,000 per megawatt hour. What is the normal price of electricity?
So the long-term average was about £50 or £60 per megawatt hour before this energy crisis. So this is 100 times greater than we were seeing just 2 or so years ago. And that is what the National Grid
has paid to this company, and that in the end comes down to us and consumers and will go on our bills.
This will go on people's bills, and it's a symptom of complete chaos and complete crisis in our energy system.
This is absolutely astonishing. Folks at home, in your cars, wherever you are, get a handle on that. You know, we have paid today 100 times the normal price for electricity so that you can watch this programme, boil a kettle, run a hot shower this evening. It is truly, truly astonishing. I warned that it was going to happen. What are the prospects of the lights going out? Or is it going to be possible if we need to import that energy from the continent?
Well, even the National Grid have said that we could see blackouts this winter. However, they do have increasing ways in which they can manage that. But we may see a brownout, which is when they pay people to switch off. But that has enormous implications for the economy, because if industry can't operate, even if they're getting a price for that, this is a bad, bad situation to be in, because cheap energy is at the heart of what makes a successful economy. And this kind of approach, where we're essentially rationing electricity. We thought this would never happen again after the 70s. We should be in an era of progress, but what we're seeing is a downward spiral, and it's born out of wishful thinking and a failure to confront the trade-offs in energy policy. Yes, people want to see a greener future. That's not entirely wrong, but we have to be honest about the trade-offs involved. We have to be honest about what different technologies can provide. And unless we do that, we're going to meet increasing difficulties.
Harry Wilkinson, thank you very much indeed. And I'm just blown away by that all-time record price that's been paid by National Grid for electricity today. Actually, it makes me damned angry. The virtue signalling and idealism of our political parties in Westminster has no connection with reality. Well, today we hit that reality. Let me know your thoughts. Do we need a new thinking strategy on energy? Farage at gbnews.uk. In a moment, we'll talk about another total failure of government policy. Yes, we'll talk about the English Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Well, your thoughts on this astonishing energy mess, because goodness me, 100 times the normal price being paid by National Grid today. It is a mess. Some of your thoughts. Daryl says, we absolutely should rethink energy policy, Nigel, but it won't. It won't. No, well, those in charge won't let us. No, they are committed to something called net zero. They believe in it. You see, as people don't believe in God anymore, they have to believe in something, and global warming has become the religion of Westminster. Believe me, I'm not wrong. Stuart says, should have happened years ago. I know, Stuart, but it didn't. One viewer says, without doubt, energy is the next battleground. It is the cornerstone of our economy and our prosperity. Without energy autonomy, we are beholden to others. Others without our best interests at heart. Well, all of that is completely and utterly true. There's one piece of good news about all of this, and that is that public opinion on this is changing, and changing quickly. And I would like to think that since GB News launched and since I started covering this topic, I would like to think that we are helping to wake people up to the fact that it's all well and good. It's all well and good having idealistic ideas, but we have to face practical reality. Now, talking of idealism, there is a fella called Justin Welby. He's the Archbishop of Canterbury. And he spoke to the House of Lords about the cross-channel migration crisis last week. This is what he had to say.
When migrants arrive here, our system is grossly wasteful in both human and financial terms. Control has become cruelty. Staggering inefficiencies by successive governments trap people in limbo at incredible expense to the taxpayer, in the system for years unable to build a life or to contribute to our society.
Well, that was Archbishop Welby. You see, we're being cruel. Well, I agree, Archbishop. We shouldn't be keeping people in Manston. Maybe the Ritz. Maybe the Ritz. The Savoy is not bad. It's been refurbed recently, and he wants them to work. That's what Welby's saying. And if you allow people who've come to the country through illegal means to work, you've no idea who you're letting in, and you're sending a signal, an open door, to countless others. It doesn't make sense. But many other things have happened in the week I've been away. We're now told that holiday camps will be opened up. The Ukrainian refugees and the homeless will be booted out because they're going to be cheaper per capita than hotels. We've learnt in Manchester, published today by the Telegraph, that you have people living in these hotels commuting to work and getting 20, 30 quid a day in cash backhanders, working as lookouts and other jobs for criminal gangs. Don't say I didn't warn you about all of this. Oh, the numbers over the weekend. Yeah, don't worry about the cold weather. 315 crossed the English Channel on Saturday, 240 crossed the English Channel yesterday. We're told there are roughly 6,000 waiting in the Dunkirk area to cross at some point between now and Christmas if we get calm weather. And the tough criminal charges the government said will be brought in for those illegally trying to gain access to Britain. Well, so far, the attempted prosecutions are running at 0.3 of 1%. And Rishi keeps saying, he keeps talking tough, he's going to deliver solutions. I'm not sure, but the icing on the cake is we now learn there's a border force strike. What on earth's all that going to mean? Well, Tony Smith is the former boss of Border Force, an international consultant on borders. Tony, we've heard a lot about nurses' strikes and rail strikes. We haven't heard much about Border Force strikes. Are these at Gatwick and Heathrow, or will this affect Dover too?
So they've announced selective ports of entry, Nigel, where they're going to strike. They're not striking at every single port. I think the objective of the unions is to cause maximum disruption to travelling public, long queues at passport controls. So one of the unions has actually announced a strike. That's the Public and Commercial Services Union. There is another union, Nigel, called the Immigration Service Union, and I was there when they set that up, actually, which has a rather different philosophy, which is they're not prepared to walk away from the border completely. Because there are checks that are done still now at our ports, even on the boats. There are checks done because we have to do checks and screening on people. And it would, I think, be fundamentally wrong for an officer from the Border Force to walk away from that duty. So I am hopeful that the ports will still be covered. I'm sorry for those passengers that are going to be delayed. That would be their strategy, though, is to actually more like work to rule, check the passports very closely, make sure that really is you, that your photograph has it. These are all things that they're entitled to do. But of course, they want to facilitate as well. But I'm really hopeful they don't all go on strike, Nigel, because that would be a retrograde step, in my opinion.
And it's about pay, of course, as all these strikes are.
Well, all the public service is the same in the same position, and so I can understand why.
Yes.
You know, they want to make a point, the same as other public servants. But I think there's a real sense of duty about protecting us and protecting the border in the Border Force, and I think they owe us that at least.
Good. Now, as I say, I've been away for a week. Nothing changes other than the Home Office become more and more desperate to find accommodation as hotels are filling up. We don't know the number, but it's well over 300 now hotels that are filled up around the country. The Albanian question. I mean, I think this has changed the nature of the debate. You know, prior to July, the big argument was, well, maybe, Nigel, they could be legitimate refugees, to which I'd respond, well, why are they all young men? But now there are people coming from this safe country of Albania. It appears, Tony, we're doing nothing. What could we do?
So I think you're right in that what we call the cohorts, or the complexion of the people on the boats, has changed significantly this year. We heard from Commander Dana Mahani at the Home Affairs Committee saying that actually a very significant number of those coming now actually come from Albania, which isn't a country that's renowned for persecuting groups of its own nationals on grounds of religion or political opinion, perhaps like Syria or Afghanistan maybe. So I think that's a different kettle of fish, really. And we've had this before. When I was in the UK Border Agency, we had something which was actually called a detained fast track process, which meant that those people that were identified by triage on arrival, so they'd have to be brought ashore, looked after, make sure they're well, all of those things that we're obliged to do under the safety and law of the sea are done very, very quickly by highly trained officers, but they don't necessarily get sent on into a hotel or inland even. They would be put in a purpose-built facility. Detained in a facility.
That's the key word, isn't it?
Yes, because we do have powers to detain illegal entrants. They are illegal entrants. A lot of lawyers will be watching this arguing about the word illegal. But there is such a thing as illegal entry, and there is a power vested in the Immigration Act 71 to detain illegal entrants, provided you've got an eye on removal, Nigel. You must be able to show there's a realistic prospect of removal. My contention that in those cases there probably is, because I think the asylum application, if it's made, is unfounded and can be proved to be unfounded quite quickly. There are other issues. Many are claiming to be victims of human trafficking. I think if the right resources are put in there, but what you need to do is put your enforcement officers, your border force officers, your casework officers, all right there 24/7 in that facility. So this can be dealt with really, really quickly. Even an appeals court, if you need one.
That all makes sense, Tony, to me. But, 1971, since then, we've had the Human Rights Act, which, of course, incorporated within it the European Convention on Human Rights and various declarations of the United Nations. We also had the Modern Slavery Act, which I think the Tories are now beginning to regret having passed. Is it possible to do these things? Is it possible to deport people who've entered the country illegally in the eyes of border forces, you did in your day? Is it possible to do it, all the while the Human Rights Act's in place?
Well, this has been the problem, has been this kind of judicial overreach of articles, international articles like the Convention on Human Rights, which, as you say, is now incorporated into domestic legislation, human slavery laws. These are all well-intentioned laws to protect us, ourselves, our own human rights, and ourselves not being victims. But I think they've gone too far, Nigel. They've now actually opened the door to the kingdom. And essentially, well, all you've got to do is make a claim under these articles. So I think there is a case for changing the law. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know whether we actually completely demur from the convention or not, but I would want really good lawyers. If I was Suella Braverman, I'd be bringing in the very, very best lawyers.
I mean, David Davis argues that in Sweden, they can deal with this, but of course it all depends on the judges. And I don't think the judges have ever been on the side of border force, have they?
Well, the judgments that have been brought over the years, they were actually, Nigel, back in the day, in the 70s and 80s, we were empowered to do all kinds of things by the courts in terms of determining what an illegal entrant was. You could be an illegal entrant after seeing an officer if you produced a false passport or if you told lies. Then that was all interpreted by the courts as being power to us to detain and remove. So it hasn't always been like that, but I think that there's been this last 20 years what we call successive judgments in Europe about the rights of individuals to go to another country, to claim human rights, to claim asylum. All of that has absolutely swamped the caseworkers in the homes. They can't cope with it because they're faced with so many pressures that how are you going to get a case to conclusion, let alone onto an aircraft? It's a huge, huge effort. So they've got to match that effort. They've got to put in caseworkers, enforcement officers, good lawyers, and really invest. But it can be done, Nigel. It's been done before.
Looking ahead to 2023, and we've seen 8,000 in a year, 2020, become 28,000 in a year. In 2021, we're just shy of 45,000 for this year. It'll be 50 by the end of the year if we get some calm weather. I've no doubt about that. And we head towards next year. The government repeatedly talking tough, delivering nothing. Worth reminding everybody that those that come across the channel, in nearly every case, have already crossed the Mediterranean. And I fought against that EU policy back in 2015. I thought it was a mistake. Just bring us up to speed. What's been happening in the Mediterranean in the last few months?
Well, Frontex, the European Border Agency, just released new figures today, Nigel, to show 68% increase on last year, over 300,000 now illegal entries detected at the external border. They're in the same situation. That's detected, but they're admitted into the EU. A significant number are crossing the borderless Schengen zone, heading up towards Calais. If the signal is still sent to migrants in the EU and outside, and traffickers in the EU and outside, that the doors are open, more will come, unless we can start showing real deterrent. And the only way to show a real deterrent, in my experience, I've been doing this for a long time, Nigel, is to start returning people, demonstrating to people. Even the Archbishop said, look, there's only so many we can take. If that's true, then there's some that we can't take. We need to focus on them, not just in terms of refusals, but removals. And, the media needs to be out out there covering people being sent back. That needs to go on TikTok. That needs to go on Facebook. When people start waking up to the fact that this is a waste of time, why am I paying €5,000 to someone to nearly drown in the English Channel, freezing temperatures, and then I'm back in Tirana next week? It's a bit of a no-brainer,
That's how you break the model.
That's how you break it, yeah.
Tony Smith, thank you very much indeed. And, on the political side of this, some very interesting comments. David Davis, respected senior Conservative Member of Parliament, regularly appears on this show. And Davis made the comment at the weekend, if we don't solve this, we will all lose our seats, referring to Conservatives in the north of England. In a moment, we'll move on to some other topics. We'll talk about corruption in Brussels. Oh, yes, we will.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Well, much of the country, not all, but much of the country did come to a standstill at 7 o'clock on Saturday. The World Cup football quarter-final against France. And it was a very, very disappointing result. Poor old Harry Kane, the captain, missing that second penalty. It's always penalties, isn't it? It's normally extra time penalties. This one was quite close to full time. So great disappointment, but I have to say, I thought England played really, really well. And I like this team. Because you know what? It's not full of prima donnas. It's not full of yobs. It seems to work together. They behave themselves. And the manager has brought some dignity and respectability to football. And he may be a bit cautious at times, but I very much hope that Gareth Southgate stays. By contrast, cricket has been completely transformed in Britain by that man, Ben Stokes. Since he became captain, he's virtually won every single test match. We've literally lost one since he became captain. Another stunning victory in Pakistan in the early hours of this morning. I've got to say, Ben Stokes is a blooming hero. I very much hope he wins Sports Personality of the Year. He leads from the front. He truly is a giant. Now, for those that don't like sport, I'm really, really sorry, but I just had to say that. Well, then what the Farage moment? 16 apartments in Brussels raided by the police on Saturday morning. They were the apartments of MEPs and a couple of former MEPs in the European Parliament, mostly from the Socialist group. 600,000 euros in notes found in those raids. 4 people have been arrested, one of them a senior political figure, as she is a vice president of the European Parliament. The thought is that the money has come from Qatar. I'm told from Brussels tonight by several sources, expected to be many more raids on Brussels officials to come over the course of the next few days. And I feel this very personally, because for years, myself and my colleagues were put through hell by OLAF, the fraud office of the European Parliament. I went through 5 big inquiries. Even since we left the European Union, I had another legal case, a very expensive legal bill, to prove my innocence after I was accused of misusing public funds. They never, ever found that I had. But funny, isn't it? Every time there was an investigation, they told the Times newspaper before they told me. And yet all of this has been going on at the heart of Brussels for years. Never mind, someone new's moving to Brussels. This should cheer you all up. Former Prime Minister Sir Tony Blair, who 2 weeks ago told the Labour Party that it was very important for Britain and for the Labour Party to have a policy of absolutely mirroring rules that are made in the European Union. Well, his own company, his own consulting firm, is setting up a lobbying office in Brussels so that he can help to shift and change EU legislation. Mr. Blair's company, a not-for-profit company, you understand, had revenues of £66 million last year. I'm sure you'll agree there is absolutely no potential conflict of interest whatsoever. Now, that World War II generation, thought by many to be the greatest generation, well, they're disappearing very quickly. And we learnt at the end of last week of the death of Johnny Johnston, 617 Squadron. Finished up as a squadron leader, got the Distinguished Flying Cross. He was the last man on those Dam Buster raids, and he died at the age of 101. And what was remarkable about Johnson wasn't just his long career in the Air Force, wasn't just that he survived the Great War in Bomber Command, because about 50% of those that served didn't. It was his actions on that particular night. They were told they had to fly at 60 feet all the way over occupied Europe. They trained at 200 feet, but the Germans had a new form of radar. So at 60 feet, they flew all the way from the North Sea coast to the dams. 3 of the aircraft hit pylons on the way, with all of the crews killed. Even more remarkably, Johnson's plane, that was to bomb the Sorpe Dam. Unlike the Mona and the Ida, which were breached with a bouncing bomb, this was a big, heavy bomb that had to be dropped directly on a dam built of earth. And here's the most incredible part of the story. As the Lancaster crossed the Sorpe Dam, it was only 30 feet above the dam. And yet Johnson, as bomb aimer, lying flat on his stomach in the nose cone of the Lancaster, he had to be comfortable that when he pressed the button, they were in the right place. It wasn't until the plane made its 10th run towards that dam, that Johnson was pleased with the positioning, pressed the button, and the bomb landed right in the middle of the dam in the perfect place. I can only imagine what the rest of the crew must have been thinking. They must have been thinking, this man is risking our life, making us do this again and again. After the raid, Johnson described the whole thing as being exhilarating. I find stories like this utterly extraordinary. I wonder, would today's young men go and do the same thing? I'm not sure that I know the answer. In a moment, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do Talking Pints with a man called Mark Littlewood. Now,
He got a PPE from Oxford University. He joined the Liberal Democrats. He was a fanatical European federalist, but he's been through a Damascene conversion. I'll enjoy having a drink with him in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
It's that time of the day, my favourite time of the day. I'm joined by Mark Littlewood, the Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs. Mark, welcome.
Cheers,
to
Nigel.
Talking Pints. Now, you know, your background, I mean, it's not the kind of background that I normally get on with all that well. It's Oxford. It has got to be Oxford, obviously.
PPE at Balliol, not your cup of tea, right?
Yeah, and I mean, the truth is, that building over there behind us, the Palace of Westminster, it seems to be stuffed full of people that did PPE at Balliol and other colleges like that at Oxford. And you're one of them. When I first met you, and it would have been about 2004, I think, or 5, and we were in the same restaurant, and there was a terrace. We were having drinks on the terrace, and somebody whispered in my ear, "That bloke over there, he's head of press for the Liberal Democrats." And
That was red rags to a bull then, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, I wasn't rude to you.
No, with all
I wasn't rude to you.
That's very, very fair. You've never been rude to me.
I initially kept my distance, but you said hello, I said hello, and we were perfectly reasonable and perfectly friendly, as it should be.
I agree.
And I wish more of it was. But you were very much on a different side of the fence to all of this. I mean, you, as a student and onwards, and you worked for the European movement and the federalist groups, you really believed in the European project.
I did, and I think there is something quite attractive about it to a sort of classical liberal person, in concepts at least. You've seen the guts of it at the coalface, Nigel, but as a kind of concept, can we remove barriers between countries? Can we make absolutely sure that we don't go to war again? Can we make sure that if you can sell something legally in the Netherlands, that you can sell it legally in the United Kingdom, remove those barriers to entry? All of that sort of liberalising part of the European Union hugely appealed to me. And
sort of rather like John Lennon's song, Imagine.
Imagine, yeah, exactly. No, you can appreciate how the young Mark Littlewood was seduced by this Lennon-esque kind of dream. Yeah. But I think even in practical economic terms, it potentially has something to commend it. I mean, you and I are both basically free traders, right? It's just a question of how you bring about free trade. And where I became more and more suspicious about the project and eventually decided to vote for leave in the Brexit referendum was it struck me that the sort of liberalising instincts of the EU, which I'm never saying were 100% of the story, but we're getting wholly out-trumped by the interfering elements of the EU.
See, this is the point, isn't it? That you are what I would call a classical liberal. It's a species that has almost become extinct.
I know, we're rarities, sadly.
Because, the word liberal today, younger people listening to this, watching this, the word liberal today means they want to ban everything, control everything. They seem to love big business, don't like small business, believe in supranational institutions, don't think national parliamentary democracy matters very much at all. Whereas a classical liberal takes a very different view.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I've always considered myself a kind of old-fashioned liberal.
Gladstonian
liberal. I mean, I even think Margaret Thatcher was basically a Gladstonian liberal. I think in many ways you're a Gladstonian liberal. So I don't want the government to control too much of the economy. And I guess some people would say, well, that tilts you towards the right in the old-fashioned economic sort of lexicon, that I lower taxes, please, not too much heavy-handed regulation, not sure politicians are very good at spending the people's money, people are better at spending themselves, all that stuff. But I'm also very liberal on personal freedoms. I mean, I think what you do with your life, how you choose to live your life, what you drink, how much you drink, all of those sort of things should be left to individuals as well. And you're right, unfortunately, that's a rather rare mix. And increasingly, actually, all of the mainstream political parties seem to want to control our lives in terms of what adverts we can watch, whether a chocolate orange can be displayed in a certain place in a shop.
Puritanism, isn't it? It's a kind of Puritanism.
It really is.
That is correct. And you're also involved, of course, with Big Brother Watch.
Yeah.
And I've got to tell you, Mark, smart motorways. Well, I was on one last night in Kent. I normally complain that I don't actually, when I'm driving on smart motorways, I don't look at the road at all. I'm just looking at the speed cameras.
Yeah.
Because it's like being in China, And even when the conditions are good, they're telling you 50. Last night, with 5 or 6 inches of snow on the M20, they were saying we could go at 60. Well, I was doing 15.
Well, there you go.
I was in the outside lane, or what looked like the outside lane. But it really is a funny one, because I wonder, the state has got bigger and bigger at a speed that I simply cannot believe. The Conservative Party appear to me, at least, to have embraced the idea that we will look after you. From the moment of conception until your death, and we know what is absolutely best for you. We thought that Boris Johnson was kind of a libertarian because of the columns he wrote for the Daily Telegraph.
Turned out not so much.
But my worry is this. So I always think you can turn things around. I always think that a bad economy can become a good economy. There's much you can do. I really worry that we're not going to reverse the size of a state and its interference in our lives. Am I being too pessimistic?
You are. So the first person to do the job that I currently have as the Director General at the IEA was a guy called Ralph Harris, Lord Harris, great man, pipe smoker, absolutely terrific chap. And I think it was about the mid-1970s, someone put to him roughly the rather pessimistic scenario that you've put to me. What are you doing at the IEA, wasting all your time? I mean, all these companies are still nationalised, the trade unions hold the whip hand. It's all going to just get worse and worse and worse. And Harris responded by saying, cheer up. things can only get worse. And actually, what he meant about that, which is a slightly depressing thought, is that it's only when things get really, really bad that you get an inflection point, that people actually really think the way we're doing things at the moment is not working at all. And, I mean, that inflection point could go in a million different directions. I'm not saying my classical liberal side of the argument can win, but I think we're beginning to get to that. Sort of everything in Britain doesn't seem to work anymore.
Well, you know, I'm a brokenist. Even the bits that aren't on strike, like the M20 last night, hadn't been salted by Kent County Council, the Highways Authority. Don't ask me why, when we all knew several inches of snow were going to fall. We've got mass strikes about to happen in a wider range of sectors than happened simultaneously back in the winter of discontent of 78, 79.
Oh, yeah, this could be worse than the 78, 79 winter of discontent, for sure.
So this is broken Britain.
It is broken Britain. I mean, I'm trying to think of, you know, which parts of our economy are working really well. Some of it's functioning. I mean, the motorway just about functions. The National Health Service
didn't last night.
Barely functions. But it's difficult to actually think of a sector of our economy where we think, oh, we're going gangbusters on that area. You know, isn't it amazing, you know, the advances that we're making? Isn't it incredible how the National Health Service is so much better than it was 15 years ago? You'd never hear anybody saying that. And I think this has been an accumulation of government, inch by inch, steady step by step, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it just sort of catches up on you. You don't really notice it happening at the time. It's a bit like somebody standing on the banks of the River Thames out here and just throwing a pebble in every second. Not any one pebble makes a difference. Not any one government intervention or tiny little tax rise makes a difference. But if you do it long enough, you start to stem the flow of the river. The Thames would not flow as neatly as it should. And that's what we've done. We just ratcheted up taxes, regulation. We've fallen into the trap of believing that government intervention is the solution to all of our ills.
That's right.
Increasingly, something that annoys me, and I want to make sure I communicate this correctly, endless talk about vulnerable people. Now, there are vulnerable people in society, but to listen to most politicians, you would assume it's an overwhelming majority of people. It's not, it's a minority. Most British people, in my view, are resilient, not vulnerable. So we need to look after the vulnerable, but it sort of suits politicians to try and imagine we're all vulnerable.
Yeah, tell us we're victims.
Exactly. Tell
us we're victims and we need the state to come and help us.
So we've got to get off this ratchet.
Now, the Institute of Economic Affairs, as you said, founded by Ralph Harris, been around a very, very long time. I mean, you're basically lobbyists for business, aren't you?
No, quite the opposite, actually.
Well, that's what your critics say.
Well, our critics say all sorts of things far ruder than that you've just said. I mean, we believe in market economics. We actually think if you leave people to make their own choices and you allow the market to function, by and large, in most cases and in most sectors, you get better outcomes than if you leave it to politicians to sort out what should happen. Knowledge is spread throughout the economy. Individuals know better what they want than their MP knows what they want. And business and free markets are very, very different things. I think actually big business is often lobbying for a lot of state intervention. Pull up the drawbridge.
Absolutely.
We've got used to all of these complex regulations. We want to keep them in place so that we can't, so insurgents and upstarts don't come and challenge us.
So Kwasi Kwarteng was talking your language?
Yeah, Kwarteng and Truss, I think, basically did the medical diagnosis pretty well. I mean, I've likened it to this, saying that they sort of understood that the patient had, I don't know, a brain tumour. But then, unfortunately, they took a hacksaw to the patient's brain. And the medical diagnosis was basically correct, that we are too heavily taxed. We've had lamentable growth rates because of that and heavy-handed regulation. Exactly, and sort of a sense that things are just sluggishly going to get worse. So I think that analysis was correct, but I mean, books will be written about this. They acted rather too quickly, rather too rashly. They didn't really have a plan for bringing public expenditure down. But I don't think it will be long before we return to that diagnosis. I don't know which politician it will be.
I hope you're right.
I think will happen in a few years' time.
I hope you're right, and you'll be campaigning for it. And away from worrying about public policy, what are the fun things Mark Littlewood likes to do?
Well, I mean, you've already mentioned it on the show. I'm football obsessed. So, I mean, Saturday was heartbreaking. Not just to lose having played so so well. But you could sort of see if England had won that game, could well have gone on to win the entire tournament for the first time in my lifetime, and we probably would have been the favourites. Most likely now France will win it. But that just terrible opportunity missed. When the regular season's on, been interrupted now. I'm a staunch supporter of Southampton Football Club, which a bit like Saturday, Nigel, rather proves to you football is not about glory, it's about pain.
Well, we did a Farage at large from Southampton just the other week.
Yes,
and of course, on the show, on Talking Pints, sitting in that chair, albeit in Southampton, was Le God, as he's known to you guys. Matt Le Tissier.
What a hero.
Mark Littlewood, thank you for joining us on Talking Pints. OK, it's time for Barrage the Farage. What have you got for me today? Mickey asks, our government seem to be in a state of paralysis. Few people want a Labour government, but is it now unavoidable? I think it is unavoidable. You know, maybe support for Labour is not especially strong, but this guy's not Jeremy Corbyn. And what's he going to do that's worse than the Conservatives? Is he going to allow boats to cross the Channel? Is he going to put taxes up? I don't know. Mark, is it Labour assert?
I'm a betting man, Nigel, and I think the bookmakers put Labour just odds on to win a majority, but very likely to be the biggest party. That's probably right. I think the Conservatives are reckoned to have about a 10% chance of forming the next government. Yeah. That sounds about right to me.
Yeah. And of course, with a narrow majority or support from the Lib Dems, we'd get proportional representation and the whole game would change. Time for one more. One viewer asks, I think the House of Lords is an expensive waste of time. Do you agree? And if you had a second chamber, in what form? I think the whole thing's become an absolute disgrace. It has to be elected. It will challenge the Commons. Mark, 20 seconds on that.
Well, yeah, it's an oddity, this, isn't it? It is an expensive waste of time. The most important thing is not to replace it with an even more expensive, even bigger waste of time. And if you're going to have two chambers, which I quite like as a system, you've got to understand and you've got to have a theory about what makes them different. You can't just have sort of two House of Commons. The Senate and the House of Representatives in America do that rather well.
There's more to do. But at the moment, the way, we're now talking about peers in their 20s being appointed.
Yeah, getting a bit ridiculous.
Mark, thank you for your help. Thank you for your support. I'll be back in this very chair live with you tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock. Before that, it's Patrick Christie's.
It is indeed, Nigel. I've got loads coming your way. I'm, of course, filling in for the wonderful Mark Stein. And I think of all the shows that I've done here on GB News, this might be my favourite yet. The fear of being called racist, specifically Islamophobia, is that actually stopping us dealing with genuine issues such as radicalisation in our education system and, of course, most notably, grooming gangs? There's a little investigation taking place into Ngozi Fulani. Now, all maybe was not quite as it seemed there. People like Nigel were calling that out before anyone else, and maybe, just maybe, we have some answers for you there. And Harry and Meghan, the very latest, should they be stripped of their title, have accused the royal family of gaslighting. I wonder whether or not they're the ones gaslighting us. Make sure you tune in. I will be here in just a matter of moments, filling in for Mark Stein, 8 till 9 p.m.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. The cold weather will continue through this week. Ice and frost will be prevalent, and the potential for a bit more snow in some areas. The UK is kind of surrounded by low pressure systems, but not really having a direct hit on the UK. We're just staying in the cold conditions with snow showers around the edges, but some heavy snow falling at the moment across Shetland, and the snow showers will work into the mainland of northern Scotland overnight. Across the southeast, where we had the snow last night, could be really quite icy here. Elsewhere, most places dry, some misty, murky conditions persisting over central areas, but many places clear, and that will lead it to turn cold, -5, -6, even in some towns and cities, negative double figures across Scotland, perhaps as low as -20 in some locations. More snow showers coming in here as well, so ice and snow is a risk in the morning over northern Scotland. Still potentially icy across the southeast first thing, and then a few showers just drift into southeast Scotland, northeast England later on. They could have some snow mixed in. Otherwise, a largely dry day, reasonably bright, but temperatures again struggling to get much above freezing. It will feel cold, particularly as the winds pick up in the southwest. Now, here we are looking at some wet weather just pushing in during the course of Tuesday evening. This will be a mixture of rain, sleet and snow. Difficult to say how far in it's going to get and therefore how much snow we are going to see, but there could be some across the southwest during Tuesday night and into Wednesday morning. Potentially icy here again then on Wednesday morning. Further snow showers coming in across northern Scotland and a few more just coming down the east.